Okay, so today I wanted to make this little video and talk about the different types of adoption and just throw out some facts. These facts are things that I have, these are facts that I've accumulated over the last few years. I first started looking into adoption maybe 3 years ago, like really looking into it, and at that time we were focusing, or I was focusing all my attention really on international adoption. And I think for me, it's just been a general progression to get where I am today. It started out thinking strictly international, kind of gave just not even really much thought to domestic private adoptions. I just kind of always felt like that wasn't for us. And until now, and now we're at the foster to adopt. That's our stance now. That's what we want to do now. So I wanted to just share, sort of, in case you're out there trying to decide what's best for you and your family. There's so much information on the internet. Obviously, utilize that. Utilize talking to people that you know who maybe have gone through this, and get your own facts. But for me, we're finally at foster to adopt, and I wrote down some things. So first, you might be wondering what various types of adoption there are. There's domestic, which means adopting within the country you live in. International, meaning adopting outside of your country, China, Russia, Africa, wherever. And within the domestic adoptions, there are a multitude of directions you could go. You could do what we're doing, which is we're going to adopt from the foster care system. But some people will post a profile on the internet through various adoption agencies, so that prospective mothers, they can look through these families and say, oh, I would love my child to go to you. And so it's set up that way. And then you could also be in the situation maybe where you're adopting from your own family, so maybe you have a little sister who's pregnant and you're going to adopt her baby. And then that's, just a whole other spectrum. So, okay, there are also two other things you should know about. This is really for domestic adoptions again. There's closed adoptions and open adoptions. Closed adoptions meaning that everything is private. The birth mother or birth father, they don't know anything about you. You don't know anything about them. Maybe you know a little something, but once the adoption is done, it's closed. They don't have your contact information. You probably don't have their contact information. It's closed. It's very private. You know what I mean? So 5 years down the road, you're not going to get a letter from them in the mail, most likely. There are open adoptions and semi-open adoptions, which mean that, say you're going to do a full-on open adoption. You know the birth mother, whether you met through a facilitator, adoption agency, or whatever. Maybe you guys have met, you've potentially exchanged photographs, information, letters, back and forth. It could be even so open that, in some of these cases where you're supporting them, you're paying for the birth mother's hospital bills, medical bills, that sort of thing. So you may have a lot of contact with them, and then through the course of your child's life, it's going to remain open. So the birth mother can send letters and pictures and so forth, and that may work wonderfully for some families. I mean, there's no big surprise when the child turns 18. You're adopted, so. And then there's semi-open adoptions where maybe there's just, a little bit of information shared. Anyway, these are all things you need to consider and figure out what is best for you and your family, and what you think is going to be best for your child. That is, if you're doing a domestic adoption. Now, if you adopt from, let's say, Brazil, I don't even know if they have open adoptions. When I say open adoptions, I mean, I don't even know if they're open for adoption to the U.S., but say you adopted from Brazil. You're not going to know the birth parents. You're not going to have, it's not going to be open at all. These are all just going to be closed. International adoptions are going to be closed adoptions. that's just how it is. Okay, so cost. A lot of people are probably initially concerned with cost. I mean, it's just a brutal fact. There are going to be costs. If you're doing international adoptions, overseas adoptions, there are going to be a lot of costs. And typically it's going to range anywhere on the low side of $8,000 all the way up $40,000 and above. So it just depends on so many factors, and I don't think it's predictable. And another thing to consider with international adoptions is you could be halfway through the process and you may have paid out like $16,000, and all of a sudden perhaps that country or the agency you're working with on the other side is closed. It closes down, it stops. They can halt, the government can halt the adoption process, they can stop it completely. You're not going to get any of your money back. And I don't say that to frighten you or make you not want to do international adoptions. It's a cold hard fact. It could happen. So if you're doing international adoptions, you need to just be really open and honest and have a really good communication with either the adoption agency that you're working with, the facilitator, or if you're doing it through a lawyer. Sometimes, I'm not 100% sure of this because I've never done it, but I'm pretty sure you can actually work these adoptions out by just using a lawyer. Anyway, so you need to have that open dialogue going on about the cost, so you know. I mean, if you've only budgeted, you've only got $10,000, you know. I mean, some people don't have $40,000, you know, even over the course of a year or 2 years to shell out. Now, these fees aren't going to be all at once. It might be, well, your initial fee, your consultation fee, your doing all your paperwork. It might be $200. So that's this month. And then next month, for example, they might want to come and do the home study. And a home study in international adoptions, and actually domestic as well, with the exclusion of foster to adopt, is going to be anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000. Now, if you do foster to adopt, the home study is entirely free. Okay? Also, let me say this. If you go into this thinking, well, I could start the process through foster to adopt, and I'll get my home study done, and it'll be free, and then I'll switch to do international or private adoption somewhere else. You're going to have to redo it. You can't use their home study just so you get it for free. Just FYI. Okay, so that's the home study. There's a facilitator fee or an adoption agency fee, and that can usually start out around $8,000 and go. From there, you're going to have to, and I'm just looking at this list I made, a petition to the immigration, so that's around another $1,000. A visa for the child could be, around $400. You're going to have that child have a medical exam, and you and your spouse are also going to have a medical exam, and that's about $100 per person. Okay, so that's just kind of some of the little fees that you'll have. Then there's this other set of fees, and again, this is all like the private or international adoptions. Say you're going to try to adopt from Russia. Well, you're going to have to pay to go and spend some time in that country. Now, consider this. You're going to have to get off of work, you and your spouse, in some instances, one parent can go over. And I think there are some countries that don't require a in-country stay, but I'm pretty sure the majority of the countries require you to come over and spend 4 weeks, 6 weeks, I don't know. You have to get online, you have to get with your agency and figure out exactly how long you have to be there, because if you work or if your spouse works, guess what? You're going to have to take all that time off work. I hope you don't get fired. I hope that you have your finances in order so that you can do this. Now, if you're like in our situation where one of you is a stay-at-home parent, then in my case I would go over, and my husband would stay here. Mind you, we have a small child, so then you have to think, well, who's going to take care of my child? Because he doesn't go to school, he doesn't go to daycare, he doesn't have a nanny. I'm his caregiver while my husband goes to work. So these are all thoughts you have to think of. So airfare, that can cost anywhere like $4,000, and it just depends how many people are going. Maybe you want to take your whole family, you, your spouse, and your child, or your couple of children. several thousands of dollars to go to Africa, to go to Russia, to go to Guatemala, China, wherever. And then you got to consider, how much is it going to cost to stay at a hotel there? Several hundreds of dollars, right? If you're there, what if you have to stay for 6 weeks? Because there are mandatory times that you have to be there for. So say you're there for 6 weeks, how much does that cost? You got to figure that out. You also have to factor in transportation once you're there. Are you going to rent a car? How are you going to do this? Because you're going to have to be going back and forth between the airport and the courts and just spending time in the local community. It might be another $500 there. Food, also when you're there, you're going to have to be eating. So when you're doing your overseas stay, you got to consider the airline tickets, the transportation, the hotel or living arrangements, and your food. So there you go, you have that. And then ultimately when you bring your child over from the other country, now are you going to go over there for a second or third time and bring the child back with you, or perhaps you're going to pay someone through the agency or have some sort of facilitator go over, bring the child back. But again, you're paying for the airline ticket. So, I mean, if you've ever flown overseas, you'll know it's not cheap. It's not like, flying from, wherever, Texas to Cancun for a $70, special. It's going to be $1,200 more. I don't know. I haven't been to Russia, so I couldn't really tell you, but I know it's not cheap. Other considerations, now again I'm going to be talking about international. Countries sometimes fall off the list of being available to adopt from. So you need to find current information. Make sure that the country that you have in mind is actively adopting out to the U.S. There's something called hopefully I'm pronouncing this right, this is the way I've been pronouncing it for several years now, the Hague Convention, H-A-G-U-E Convention. You might want to Google that. Make sure the country that you're interested in participates. Just make sure that these countries are following strict guidelines, making sure that everything's legit. So you want to look into that. Each country has different requirements. So in one country you may have to be over 35 but under 50. You may be allowed to have one child, or maybe you're allowed to have 2 children. There are factors like, will they allow a divorced couple, maybe they're remarried, to adopt. There's usually guidelines on how much of an age difference between you and the child there is. There's that in the foster to adopt as well. I believe they want you to be at least 10 years older than the child you're adopting. So it's, a 30-year-old is not adopting an 18-year-old, or something close to that, because it's just a little creepy. I'm sure there's other reasons as well. But let's see, what else? Okay, you'll want to consider with international adoptions the timeline. I know that in the past, China's always been like a very popular place to adopt from. They've slowed it down, so you're going to expect years with an S, plural, between the time you start the process to the time you have your child home with you. And because I'm not super familiar with this, I know a couple years ago when I looked into this, China was completely checked off my list because I was reading anywhere from 48 months up for the wait. What else? Let's see. Other countries like Japan or Korea, one of the two, they'll only allow you to adopt a boy child who has some sort of a severe disability. That's kind of the only type of child that they will adopt out of their country. The rest they prefer to keep within their country. So you'll want to check into that. I mean, there's so much to look into. There's a great website. Unfortunately, you have to type it in exactly like this. It's http, the 2 dots, / adoption.state.gov/index. I'll post that in the comments. I've tried typing it in, just www. and it doesn't come up. Maybe it's just my computer. It has great information about the countries, statistics going along with it, like how many children are typically adopted out annually. Like some countries, maybe annually, they only adopt out 2 children to the U.S. annually. 2. You're not going to be one of them, most likely. You know, Angelina Jolie, Brad Pitt, they're going to get that child. In other countries, like China, back in around, was it 2007 or 97? Anyway, they were at their peak, and they were adopting out around 7,000 children annually to the States. Now it's lowered, it's down to about 3,000 children annually come over. So beware of that. And my only other concern with international adoption, and I hope I don't get flack for saying this, this is my own personal feelings, you just have to be leery and worrisome about the way these children are gotten, are procured. I don't know what the word would be, but some countries have been shut down, stopped. The adoption process has been stopped. The U.S. says, hey, we're not taking children from your country anymore because you're probably obtaining them illegally. And I want to say that was Ecuador or Guatemala just a few years ago, and maybe I'm wrong on that, but it seems like it was that country. It seems to me, and again, this is my personal opinion, feel free to say what you want to say about it, but some of these countries have really high rates of pushing these children out back to the States or other wealthy countries. I'm very leery of these countries. At one point it was like Guatemala or Ecuador, and now it seems to be Africa. And it's these countries that all of a sudden pop up, and you can get a child really quickly. You just, $30,000, here's your child. It's all done in such a short time frame. I'm so skeptical of that. I just, how many years is that going to happen until all of a sudden you're put on, stop, this can't be right, how are you getting these poor children? Just do your research, ask questions about it, not to scare you again, Some countries are completely, I'm sure a lot of it is completely legit, but in some cases it's not going to be. So that is that. Back to kind of where we are. So I got off the international adoption kick and have sort of, I don't want to say evolved because that will be insulting to someone who's going to go forth with international, but in my own process I've evolved to the point of foster to adopt. There are thousands of children right here in our own country that need homes. And you can sit there like I did and weigh out the options and think, well, if I adopt from another country, maybe there will be less baggage. Maybe this child isn't going to have all these emotional issues. But that's kind of BS, because that child is ripped away from its mother and father, whether it was through death, neglect, poverty, abuse, whatever. That child is coming over with the same issues, really, that a child through foster care is coming from. Child in foster care might have been taken away from its mom or dad. Maybe their mom and dad are in prison, or or on drugs, poverty again. I mean, just so many different things. And I don't even think poverty would do it. Not here, not in this state, or not in this country, unless it was so extreme. But so, just for me, I weighed that out for a while. I kind of think that was what was guiding me towards international. So these children will come over and have less issues. So no, and now I'm to the point where I feel like that's so not true. So I just want to stay local. There's virtually no cost involved. From here, it's going to be anywhere from free to maybe a few $100s, maybe $1,000 at the end. I think at the very end, you're going to have a little bit of legal fees because you have to go to court and say, we're here, we want to adopt baby Joey and his little sister, to be part of our family. And maybe you want to have a lawyer there to make sure everything is signed legit or whatever. And I'm sure there are refunds available for that, and I'm sure there are even lawyers through your family services center to help you do that. So I'm guessing, and I've read online, it's for foster to adopt anywhere from 0 to maybe 2,500 max. So, that's kind of where we are. Fostering to adopt. So far it's been an awesome experience. You know, we've only done a few things thus far. We're getting ready to get onto our home study, and I'll obviously update you with that information. Today was just more just letting you know what I know. In case you're maybe new into this journey or you haven't quite started it, you know, check out books at the library. Definitely get online. Get online with an open mind, though, because there is so much information out there. And check the dates that things were written online, because you might be reading an article from 1998, and you know, for me right now it's 2011. Maybe you're watching this video and it's like 2014. All the information is going to constantly change. So just keep that in mind. Try to get current information. Open your phone book. If you can either call if you're interested in fostering to adopt, even if you just want to get a little information, look up the Family Services or Department of Welfare. DCS is what's on Department of Child Services. It just kind of depends on your state. Also in the phone book, you can look on the yellow pages under adoption, adopt. Call some of those agencies. They'll give you so much information. You can ask them, what countries are currently open to adoption, and which ones are the fastest, and which one do you feel like are the safest, and all that information. People will answer your questions without hesitation, trust me. Because a couple years ago, when I was going that route, I did just that. I got in the phone book and called local agencies, and it was, here's the information. So anyway, hope this helps, and on to lighter subjects.